Humans have lived with infectious microbes since our very first beginnings, and they have been, for most of our history, one of humanity's biggest preoccupations. Fortunately for us, modern science has had many shining successes against infections. And to understand these successes, as well as our ongoing vulnerabilities to pathogens, we need to look at where we've come from and where we are now. Louis Pasteur's germ theory, which originated in the 1870s, marked the dawn of our modern-day approach to microbes by illuminating for the first time the immense landscape of microscopic infectious pathogens that were behind the most problematic diseases of the time. It was a turning point, after which medics and scientists began to develop and use hygiene principles and antimicrobial agents to prevent infection. Improvements in sanitation, water treatment, and pasteurization that were subsequently adopted have saved millions of lives and are still vital today. But despite these advances, the leading causes of death in the early 1900s remained infectious diseases, especially pneumonia and tuberculosis. Smallpox, cholera, diphtheria, and polio were also widespread. Average lifespan was just 40 to 50 years, in part because childhood infections were frequently fatal, and infections we now consider minor could lead to sepsis and death. Against this background, it's no wonder that the first licensed vaccines in 1914 and the first widely distributed antibiotics in 1928 were hailed as miracles of modern medicine. The decades that followed World War II were a golden age for vaccine and antibiotic development, culminating in the complete eradication of smallpox, near eradication of polio, and the ability for people to live their lives unencumbered by the fear of catching diseases that could cause paralysis, brain damage, blindness, and death. The control over infectious diseases was such that their cumulative mortality rates dropped from 797 to just 36 per 100,000 people per year between 1900 and 1980. This allowed scientific and medical attention to shift to what then seemed like more pressing concerns: chronic diseases such as heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. Aside from the tremendous difference that these medical advances made, what's also remarkable about this is that it is only relatively recently in human history, and only really in industrialized countries, that infectious diseases have taken a backseat. Of course, COVID-19 thrust infections back to the forefront, highlighting the potential for new pathogens to emerge and wreak havoc across the world. Prior to that, though, it's arguably in part down to sheer luck that prior outbreaks, such as SARS and Ebola, never completely took hold on our shores. And these emerging diseases are not the only reason for growing concern and interest in new antimicrobial solutions. There's increasing recognition that some pathogens can contribute to chronic symptoms and the chronic diseases that we normally consider separate from infectious ones. The scientific community is also sounding alarm bells over the ever-growing incidence of antimicrobial resistance. COVID-19 dramatically changed the collective concern around infectious diseases. But the reality is that protecting ourselves against infectious disease has always been important. The current world of infectious disease-causing microbes is still quite vast.